Hey Chris, before we leave this beautiful site, I'd like to start the car and show you what it sounds like. I'm going to start it in Comfort, then we'll go to Sport, and then Sport Plus. So stick with me here and we'll blip the throttle a little bit.
Hey, let's do it. Sounds great.
Good morning, Chris.
Hey, good morning, Richard.
So we're here right by the Newport Back Bay, and it's a beautiful morning. It's early November. This is a natural habitat, just a beautiful part of Newport Beach. And we're here shooting a video about a car that we've had on loan from Aston Martin in Newport Beach. We've driven it now a couple days. I can give you some driving impressions a little bit later on in this video, but it's really a terrific car. We've had a lot of fun with it. This is the DB11 Volante. It has the V8 engine, which is interesting. As you know, I have a DB11, a V12, 600 horsepower. This is 503 horsepower. But interestingly, the torque is approximately the same. Torque in this is 513 foot-pounds, in the V12, 516 foot-pounds. So driving it around town, not much difference. It's a very good handling car. The weight distribution on this car is 47 front, 53 rear. On my car, it's 51 front, 49 rear because of the heavier engine. But the two cars, the V12 that I have and this V8, weigh within about 5 or 6 pounds of each other, about 4,150 pounds, because what they've done on this car, they've stiffened the springs, they've added tighter bushings in the back, and overall they've created a car that handles much like the V8 Coupe, which is said to be a little bit more nimble than the V12. And this is exactly what we found when we've been driving this car. So Chris, just a few more things on the performance aspects of this car. It has a ZF 8-speed transmission, which frankly is terrific. We'll go through some of the performance modes for the powertrain, but it shifts quickly when it's in Sport Plus, shifts smoothly when it's in Comfort. 0 to 60 time on this car is 3.9. Chris, let's walk around this car a little bit and just look at some of the great features. First of all, it has the classic, iconic Aston Martin grille. As I mentioned once before on the video that we did with the DB11, these badges are handmade in England by one jeweler that makes all of the badges for the Aston Martins. So Chris, one thing that is a way to distinguish between a V8 and a V12 Aston Martin is that the V8s have 2 functional vents on the hood. The V12s have 4 functional vents on the hood. So let's walk around this car. We can take a look at the back of this DB11 Volante as well. In a couple minutes when I pop the hood, you'll see that there's air extracted from the wheel well, comes out of this vent here in sort of what's called the curlicue fashion, but it helps exhaust air out of the wheel well, also dissipates heat, but it helps keep pressure from building up. I like the way they've done a great job with this lower lip here, very sporty. They've pushed the wheels out. It's got a good long wheelbase, good for handling, comfort, but they pushed it out so it maintains a great shape. I also want to comment on the back deck lid. Aston Martin worked very hard to keep the profile of the Aston Martin coupes and not create a bulge here in the back once the top is folded. I like the way the rear deck looks as if it's a speedboat. As you know, I grew up in upstate New York near the Finger Lakes. I can remember the days of the Chris Craft boats going down the inboards, the sound they made going down the Keuka Lake, Seneca Lake. And as this car, as you know, has a great sound, but I love the style of this. Also, that's near Watkins Glen, where I grew up, went to a lot of car races up there, worked as a volunteer. I'd like to show you a couple things. I love the style of the back. It's got a spoiler that pops up at higher speeds. It also has, in classic script, the Aston Martin logo below the badge. As you know, they had not had the name of the car on the back, but frankly, even though there are quite a few of these in this area where people love cars, it lets people know what this is. I've had a lot of people come up when I'm driving mine and asking, it's a great car, what is it? I love the way they've done the diffuser on this. They've got the anodized black exhaust tips. And again, our car came from Aston Martin in Newport Beach. One interesting thing here is the gas filler. There's no gas cap per se. It's sort of like a race car. It's just putting the nozzle in here, quick fill, and then you're done. Now, let's go around. I'm going to run around and pop the hood. Let's see how much we can get before the planes start flying overhead. This is a one-piece aluminum clamshell hood. It's the biggest piece of stamped aluminum used in the automotive industry. And this will give us a good look, Chris, at this V8 power plant, 4-liter twin turbo, sourced from Mercedes-AMG. This is essentially the same engine that I had in my 2016 AMG GTS that I traded in on the Aston Martin DB11 V12. It has 503 horsepower, 513 pound-feet of torque, a little bit larger or higher than it was in the AMG at that time. And it's set far back into the car so that, again, it helps achieve this 53% weight distribution. It means they've given up the glove box, but Chris, I'd take the handling that we get with this. It makes the car feel as if it's rotating around you, almost like it's, I guess you could call this front mid-engine. And you know, there's plenty of storage in the center console and in the trunk in the back. The performance off the line and when cruising is great. You can see on your side, as I have over here, these vents for extracting air and heat out of this front area, coming out through the curly Q's, helps keep heat buildup and pressure buildup from under the wheel wells, helps keep the car planted. And again, you can see the wide tires. There's a tremendous amount of grip, and we'll have a chance to go around some of my favorite corners a little bit later and see how well this car handles. Okay, let's take a look at convertible top operation. This can be done with a switch inside the car or from the key fob. Now the time for the top to go up is just 16 seconds. And this is an 8-layer constructed top with canvas and layers of insulation. The inside is finished just like a luxury DB11 coupe. Now the top can go down in 14 seconds. It speeds up to 50 kilometers per hour or 31 miles an hour, and even into a headwind. So I think, as you and I saw, Chris, when we were driving around, this is a very quiet car with the top up. And yet, when the top is down, it maintains those classic, elegant Aston Martin lines. So Chris, let's take a look at the interior. This has some interesting options on it. I love the carbon fiber trim and inlays on the dash and on the door panels. And there's actually carbon fiber on the seat backs, which is another option. These can be done in many different ways. And then front and back, we got the seats pretty far back, but there are rear seats with child seat anchors. And you have the Aston Martin Wings logo both on the rear seats and on the front seats. Front seats are heated, ventilated. The seat controls are on the side. They're very handy. It means the driver can adjust the passenger seat as well as his or her own seat. I like the steering wheel. It comes from the shape of one of their limited performance cars. And it has the dark anodized trim around the bezels, including in the upgraded Bang & Olufsen sound system, and on the shift paddles, which are column mounted in this car. Some of the controls on the panel, the push buttons for gear selection on the transmission, a lot of the air conditioning, automatic or manual here, seat heating, seat ventilation. Down here, nav, radio, media like CDs, MP3, and telephone. Adjust the sound here or on the thumb wheels. A lot of controls on the thumb wheels, the usual things, telephone, voice activation, and also the controls for the transmission, 3 suspension settings, comfort or GT mode, which is where it starts, Sport, Sport Plus. Same over here for powertrain, transmission, engine mapping, Comfort, Sport, and Sport Plus. Very handy if you're diving into a corner. You can make adjustments on the fly. You're not looking for a knob to make those changes. There's also in the system here, you can go in through the scroll wheel and selecting, and you can pull up where you can shut off electronic stability control, traction control, put it in track mode, or completely off. And you can make this car dance around. And actually, people do take these cars and the DB11 coupes to the track. And then a couple other controls here. All of this, by the way, is sourced from Mercedes, so it's very similar to what was in my version and the current versions of the AMG GT cars. Controls here for top function up and down, which can be controlled from the key fob, and also the center console here can be opened in 1 or 2 or a manual, which is sort of a cool function. And this has a very special interior where on the coupes you would find the same interior. And when we jump in the car, I'll run through what some of the dash output looks like depending on what the powertrain settings are in, whether it's GT, Sport, or Sport Plus. Okay, Chris, let me start this up. When I put my foot on the brake, this engine start button lights up in red. Press the engine to start it. I'm starting it in GT mode on the powertrain settings and GT on the suspension settings. So let's run through just really quickly here some of the things that we'd expect to see on the dash. In GT mode, I'm getting the fuel level on the left and I'm getting water temperature. And then also on the right, you can see that I can scroll through several settings. In fact, down here under settings, if I go into here, this is where I can have the ESP set for either off completely or in track. Now if I scroll back into some of the trip settings, this is the usual range, some of the resets for distance, speed, mileage from start. And you and I have been doing totally stop and start, so I think our average speed is probably about 12 miles an hour. So when I push the button to put this into sport mode, you'll see that the tachometer changes. What it's done is it moves the high RPM range to the top of the dial. It makes it much easier when driving quickly in a sporty manner and you want to use your manual shift paddles. You can gauge the RPM much more clearly. Also in Sport, and when I press the button again to get it into Sport Plus, you'll see that you get a deeper, throatier sound, and we've added oil temperature on the left in addition to water temperature in the gas gauge. And again, the ability, it goes red, and you can see the high RPMs at the top of the tach. And if I go over to the suspension setting buttons, you'll see that I can go from the comfort mode, GT mode, to Sport, and then on into Sport Plus. And again, very handy when driving. You can make these changes on the fly, which I really appreciate.